21 till the hour here in the IMUS Morning Program. Please welcome now to the program my old friend, the political pundit, social commentator, Carl Jeffers. Good morning, Mr. Jeffers.
Good morning, Don. Great to be with you again.
So, what were you talking about yesterday? You just started telling me, and I couldn't hear you.
I was only mentioning in passing. Yesterday, the Dr. K show launched in the Washington, Maryland, Virginia area in WTNT, and they've named me their chief political analyst. We had Judge Napolitano also on, and they brought up the topic of race because they were talking about something that Kate Smith, the ironic, iconic singer who used to do God Bless America. And when we were growing up, Kate Smith represented the top. That in 1931, she actually recorded a song called That's Why Darkies Were Born. And I was explaining in the context of where America was in 1931 that that's not indictable about Kate Smith, and it doesn't take away from what she became in the 70s and 80s in America. And in that context, your name came up, and I said that I've actually been vindicated because of the fact, and they brought up that original incident, and I said that at that time, I had never met Don, and I was advocating take him at his word, let the suspension go through, but when it's over, he says, when I come back, I'm going to use my show as a forum to have a conversation about race as part of what we do. And I said, that's so important in the country because it's exactly not having that conversation is why people wouldn't understand Kate Smith's recording in 1931 prior to the big band era even and progressive music being a way to bring the races together to some degree. And I said, since that time, I have met Don. We've worked together. I visit with him regularly. And then after 4 years, it's such a genuine, natural relationship that I've been vindicated in knowing that he was genuine at that time. And I couldn't have known that not having met you. It was my perception and what I felt politically the strategic move to make was if he's got as large a forum as he has, and we need this conversation so desperately in the country, and he's willing to make that commitment, then let the suspension end and bring him back. Take advantage of that. But that's not the course that the network took at that time. But since then, because of the nature of our relationship, which is evolved to the point now where we bring up race when we want to. And when we don't, we talk about anything else we want to, just like two friends. That vindicates the fact that I felt that it made sense and that you've demonstrated that inside, clearly, you're very genuine. And things that happen, we all do. And we all make mistakes. And those kinds of things, as opposed to someone deliberately trying to insult or incite racial or prejudicial feelings needs to be distinguished. And so it was a positive compliment to you.
I got accused at the time, and still do occasionally, of being, one, a racist.
Yes.
And then people like Michael Wilbon, who's a punk, by the way. And I saw him on television accusing me of using the N-word in a particular context, which was not true.
Okay.
But he just assumed that it was, and then I got accused. But as I've thought about it over the years, of all of the things that I've done in my life, I regret that one comment more than almost anything. And I wouldn't have regretted it if I hadn't have gone and talked to the girls involved.
Right.
Which was and for my wife too. Which was a life-changing experience.
That's great. I appreciate that.
It was a 3 or 4 hour conversation with young black girls who
all were academically, by the way, quite accomplished in addition to their sports and athletic skills.
But a 6-second comment about young black women and their appearance and their hair, as sensitive as that is, and having been raised in a community that was half black and never having heard the N-word until I went in the Marine Corps.
Right.
I was 17 years old. So I already knew what about the racism within the black community between dark blacks, dark blacks.
Sure. You used to call them high yellow.
Exactly.
I understand. Sure.
Comments about hair and that sort of thing. So, when you and I met, we could have a conversation about that. But I don't feel. I was talking about it earlier this morning. I saw Charles Barkley, who and Kenny Smith.
Okay.
Another basketball player.
Yeah, Kenny the Jet. Yeah.
And a couple of other guys.
They have a great show on TNT.
Oh,
with Ernie Johnson is a great host, and they have great chemistry.
But they were talking about, and Charles and Kenny said, and there were a couple of other black guys, and they said, you know, they still feel that America is segregated.
Okay.
And Ernie was arguing with him that he didn't think that was right. He said, because look at, we're all here or whatever.
Right.
And I thought at the time that maybe they were using the wrong word. But there still is palpable racism in this country.
No question, which is, it's funny, too, because that's an easy statement to extend segue-wise to the fact that I absolutely disagree with Justice Scalia and his comments from the Supreme Court about why we would need to strike down the 5A section of the Voting Rights Act because of the statements he made that we've reached a society that is sort of perpetuating racial entitlements. This is not about racial entitlements. This is about preventing a relapse back to situations that, in fact, were used to suppress black voting. And if you want to know how things have changed, they haven't changed enough that Tom DeLay didn't send people over to Florida in 2000 to disrupt voting booths, or that school buses with black voters on the bus were rerouted all the way across town because they were told that they couldn't vote at their districts. And by the time the bus got over there, the voting precinct office was closed. These are the kinds of things that don't reach out to the suburbs. And that's why it's easy for someone to say, no, we don't need that anymore. Look at what you got. You got an African-American in the White House. You've got this, you got that. Look at the TV. But then the many African-Americans can say that I don't have to look at the White House. Why don't you come look at my neighborhood and then look at your neighborhood and see what the institutional impact is of racism, where it's not an individual anymore. You know, it's like we were having this conversation yesterday. Somebody who could be completely free themselves of overt prejudice and racism. But if they happen to be a human resources director and they see a resume comes in and one says Bobby Sue Venton or something and the other one says LaQuisha, they may take the LaQuisha and assume that because it's LaQuisha, it's possibly an African American, and they assume that I'm probably not going to hire her, and so I'm not going to bother to interview her. That's what they're talking about.
And there's still a vile anti-Semitism right here in New York City. And
well, I don't know about New York City, but in Oberlin, in Ohio, I mean, what I'm saying is that it's hard to imagine, as someone who's grown up in a very liberal, environment. I mean, my family, my parents never used the N-word once in the entire time that my brother and sister and I were being raised, and they never made a comment about any group, anti-Semitic, Catholic, anyone. They just never allowed that. And, you know, if you grow up in an environment like that, then you don't have those kinds of preformed prejudices. And in New York, with such a tremendously significant Jewish population, the anti-Semitism would have to be more symbolic than anything else. But out in Ohio, at Oberlin College, they're having a big sensational kind of crisis right now because of racial incidents on the campus that include a lot of anti-Semitic signs as well as anti-black signs. So America still has a long way to go. And I would use that to segue into the statements about the governance of America now, because I heard the Chris Christie quote, and he's right about you can't set up a meeting 2 hours ahead of time. The president and the speaker and the congressional leaders, they met for 45 minutes on this sequestering. Don, it takes 45 minutes to arrange the protocol for the seating at the table. You can't accomplish this then. And I think that part of this problem is it's the same Congress, by the way, that implemented the sequester program that's now dealing with it. This is not one of those standard situations where you kick the can down the road for 5 years or 10 years and let them deal with it. They knew that they would have to deal with it, and what they were creating was supposed to be so draconian that neither side would want it to happen. And I've been saying that the problem with this sequestering problem is that both sides did not want it to happen, but both sides also saw some political gain if it did happen, and that's part of the reason why they allowed it to happen. And it's very unfortunate and very sad about where we are in America today.
Always nice to see you.
It's always a great pleasure.
We could talk for another hour or two.
We could, and one day maybe we will.
Maybe. Thank you. Carl Jeffers here on the IMUS Morning Program, 11 minutes down till the hour.